In May 2024, the American Civil Liberties Union filed a formal complaint against Aon Consulting with the Federal Trade Commission, backed by the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. The allegation: tools marketed as bias-free were systematically screening out autistic candidates. Researchers at Duke University found that large language models rate the phrase, "I have autism," as more negative than "I am a bank robber." The architecture was never neutral. For a decade, enterprise hiring vendors promised algorithmic neutrality, models trained on large data sets, free of human prejudice. The Aon complaint marks the end of that claim. The FTC's initiative, Operation AI Comply, has shifted regulatory posture from voluntary ethics frameworks to active enforcement under Section 5 of the FTC Act. Every claim of bias-free performance must now be backed by rigorous, transparent empirical evidence or face federal action. The black box defense is finished. The Aon assessment suite represents 3 failure modes operating in sequence. ADEPT-15, a computer adaptive test, evaluates 15 personality constructs, including liveliness, positivity, and awareness, that track directly with neurotypical social performance. An algorithm trained to favor socially bold candidates will systematically exclude autistic individuals without ever asking for a diagnosis. vidAssess-AI compounds this. NLP models trained on neurotypical speech patterns interpret flat intonation and atypical pauses as lack of confidence. gridChallenge, a gamified working memory test, layers simultaneous distractor tasks that cause sensory overload for candidates with processing disorders. 3 tools. 1 recursive problem. The architectural response addresses bias at its structural root, not its surface outputs. The first layer is Causal Representation Learning. Traditional machine learning operates on correlation, and correlation is where discrimination hides. A structural causal model formalizes the dependencies explicitly. Let A represent a protected attribute, neurodivergence. X represents applicant features. Y represents the hiring outcome. The model is designed to ensure interventional invariance. The representation used for the final decision is mathematically isolated from A, such that altering a hypothetically leaves Y unchanged. This is counterfactual fairness, not a policy position, but a mathematical guarantee. The second layer is adversarial debiasing. A primary model, the predictor, is trained to identify the most qualified candidate. A secondary model, the adversary, runs simultaneously, attempting to guess the candidate's protected characteristic from the predictor's internal data representations. When the adversary succeeds, it means the predictor is still encoding protected information as a proxy for performance. The system then penalizes the predictor through an adversarial loss function, forcing it to unlearn those patterns. The third layer is counterfactual fairness auditing. This generates synthetic variations of a real candidate's data, changing only the sensitive attribute while holding all other variables constant, and verifies that the recommendation remains consistent. Individual fairness, not statistical group parity. 3 layers. Each closes one of the pathways that Aon's tools left open. The regulatory record confirms the stakes. The FTC has already fined Do Not Pay $193,000 for unsubstantiated claims about its AI legal services. Permanent bans on selling high-risk software are now an active enforcement tool, not a theoretical warning. The EEOC secured hundreds of millions of dollars in monetary relief for discrimination victims in the 2024 fiscal year. An algorithmic bias is now a stated top enforcement priority. New York City's Local Law 144 mandates annual independent bias audits for automated employment decision tools, and an employer cannot shelter behind a vendor's model card. The Aon complaint exposed exactly this liability. Aon's own documentation claimed no adverse impact, while the tools themselves were likely screening out qualified candidates based on race and disability. Duke University's research makes the underlying mechanism legible. Large language models associate neurodivergent identifiers with negative valence at a rate that exceeds clearly criminal self-descriptions. The bias is not emergent, it is structural. By 2027, the global talent economy is projected to reach $30 billion. Neurodivergent individuals carry documented advantages in pattern recognition, attention to detail, and sustained analytical focus, precisely the cognitive profile that drives engineering and research roles. An enterprise running Aon-style screening tools is mathematically filtering out that talent. The Aon complaint is not an isolated compliance incident. It is proof that the costs of surface AI, legal liability, regulatory fines, reputational damage, class action exposure, are exponentially higher than the upfront investment in architecturally sound alternatives. Enterprise AI policy is a contract of trust with employees and candidates alike. Cheap tools do not honor that contract. We've published a 15-page technical brief examining the ACLU complaint in full, the architecture of the tools, the regulatory enforcement posture, and the deep AI framework for building hiring systems that are both legally defensible and mathematically fair. Read the 15-page brief. Approximately 18 minutes.